question from Brent. So do you think it's better to purchase two properties below, excuse me, do you think it's better to purchase two properties below 500,000 than one for $1 million? So what I might do, first I'll take a sip of water. But what we might do here is we might just run through, I think I just like to highlight some cash flow modeling for people as well, and I'll zoom in for the sake of everybody's eyeballs here as well. So if we zoom in here on the cash flow tool, if we're buying two properties at that kind of $500,000 price point, and we're kind of likely to be at around about a 5.2% yield. Actually, the average is 5 last month, so we'll go with 5. My voice will hopefully get through the rest of the hour. We'll see how we go. I've just got some pre-inbuilt rates over here at 2,500, 1,300, 1,700. Maintenance locked in there as well. We've got property management fees fixed in at 8%. And then what we might do is we might put, most people are going out and buying property at around that kind of 88.5%, but it ends up rounding up to 90%. So we're going to keep the LVR at 90%. So in this situation here, if we've got two properties at 500,000, and if we go out to the dashboard here and we make sure that we factor them in, and we want to make sure we're buying them, I should have done this as well, we're buying them in the same year. Two properties, and we've got them at a 6.5% rental increase. Sorry, 6.5% interest rate, I should say. So if we scroll down here, we can see we've got two properties. They're worth about $1 million. There's $900,000 of debt on them. So we've got $100,000 in equity. They're bringing in about $50,000 in rent across them both. And they've got total repayments on just the interest portion of their holdings of $58,500. They've got their outgoings, so that's rates, water, insurance, property management, maintenance. We've got a buffer in there. And it means your net rent, so that's essentially what your cash flow before negative gearing and depreciation is about $25,500 per annum. Now, again, what are going to be the benefits if you're buying two $500,000 properties? So one of those benefits are going to be that you could argue that you're more diversified. So what I mean by that is that you're spread over two locations, so the performance of your properties aren't tied to one market. So you can have one property losing, one property winning, but you're not feeling as much of the pain. Now, the other arguments can be made that that the negatives of that is that you've got two lots of outgoings to pay, right? You've got things like rates, water, insurance, maintenance bills that'll all come through. And unfortunately, things like maintenance, it doesn't really stack up dollar for dollar in terms of if you've got $1 million property or a $500,000 property, if the dishwasher breaks, if the aircon breaks, they're probably going to cost a pretty similar amount to fix them. And if something major happens, like, the property needs to be re-stumped or it's a plumbing issue, as a percentage value of the property, it's going to be much higher on a $500,000 property as opposed to $1 million property. Now, if we just have a remember here, so we're at $25,500 here. If we just said, all right, we're going to buy one property here, and it's at $1 million. Now, some of the considerations here is that we're not going to be getting a 5% yield. We're probably going to be getting about a 4.3 or something like that, depending where we buy. Maybe if we're lucky, we might even bring that down to say 4.2. And our outgoing costs are going to be more because things like rates, water, insurance are just going to be more. So we're going to say it's about 3.2, it's about 1,500, and that's about 1,900. Maintenance, again, we're going to keep that the same, except you've only got one of them to pay for here moving forward. So the difference now will be, as you'll see here, change that to 1, and we scroll back down. So we're basically in the same scenario. We've got $1 million, we've got 900,000 in debt, so we've got 100,000 in equity, but we're taking in far less rent, but our outgoings aren't as much. So the difference here, we mentioned before, I think it was about 25.5 or somewhere around that number. So here we're at 27.5. Now, on that $1 million property, like I mentioned, you might have less maintenance issues come through. You will not be as diversified, that's for sure. Again, that someone might not really care. Someone might actually be time poor and they prefer to have just one property to manage instead of two properties to manage. There's also the counter argument that $1 million property might be a property that's actually a newer build and it's got more depreciation on that property, so it can actually offset some of those outgoings. Now, Do $1 million properties or $500,000 properties grow any better or worse than the cheaper ones? Absolutely not. There's no data to back up that the more expensive versus the less expensive properties grow more. They just will typically be tied more to cycles. So at the moment, whilst interest rates are lower, we are finding, due to affordability and servicing, that there is more competition at the lower end of the market. So those lower end properties are performing more stronger than the higher end properties because, again, people don't have the servicing there and they're not able to get into the market. Now, as rates will come down, you'll actually start to see that inverse potentially, where your more expensive properties will have more competition because serviceability is opened up to them. There's far less expensive properties than there are affordable properties because, again, they're so far away, removed from new home build prices, so that they're more scarce, right? So they tend to perform better when there's more servicing available. So there's no right or wrong answer. I hope that answers your question, Brent. But again, it's really just a personal based decision. Now, sometimes when I'm dealing with clients, the thought of them buying a $500,000 property in a regional location, there's two people involved, there might be a husband and wife, one of the two parties just does not feel comfortable with investing in a regional location where, someone's really adamant in just only being in a metro location. So it all comes down to personal preference. Where you're going to get the best result is if you're in the market. So if you're going to sit on the sides for 6-12 months and kind of to and fro, whether you buy $1 million or a $500,000 property or a metro or a regional, there's no growth happening when you're out of the market. So normally I would just say it's what fits you best. There is no one size fits all. The other counter argument I guess you could make on the more expensive property as well is that $1 million property, if we're talking much further down the track, let's just say 10, 15, 20 years, the opportunity to potentially subdivide it, add a granny flat, knock down, rebuild, whatever it might be, there is the potential that something like that might actually turn a profit. Again, not that we go down that route here at Ripehouse, but again, it'd be more likely than unlikely on the $1 million property that could potentially bear fruit. Whereas if you've got the $500,000 property, in 10 years, knowing right now that professional developers can't even make $1 million lot work for them, in 10 years, the $500,000 lot's not going to work for them either. So that's just, again, there's all these pros and cons. It's all about molding it to what suits you best.